Business Takeout presents The Takeout Effect with Banki. The Takeout Effect brings real conversations in business.
Welcome to the Takeout Effect, bringing you real conversations in business. I'm your host, and my name is Banki. The Takeout Effect is brought to you by Business Takeout. Business Takeout is a nonprofit. It is a social enterprise that provides business education to Black entrepreneurs. We are located in Canada, and let the show begin. So today's guest has been featured in, has articles in Crime Magazine and Medium, if I'm correct. He's been a writer. He's a freelance writer, writes short films, short stories, commercials, and articles. He's also a mental health advocate. Let's introduce Carlos Anthony. Welcome, Carlos.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you so much for having me on here. It is a privilege and an honor.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being here. We're gonna dive right into it. A freelance writer. At what age did you say to yourself, I really like writing, this is something that I wanna do?
It was probably maybe like 3-4 years ago. I was with my best friend Matthew, and he wanted to get into like filmmaking because he's been like an ace of all trades, but like filmmaking is a thing that he just never got a chance to do. And I've always been a storyteller, but I've never actually wrote down my stories. So I started writing to kind of process some of the experiences that I was going through at the time. And him and I had this idea that we were just going to develop content. So that's just kind of how I got started. And then I started getting a lot of validation from people telling me that, my writing was really good. And I wanted to take it to the next step. I got a mentor, Pollyanna Reed, who you guys have actually had on the show before. Through working with Pollyanna Reed, she ended up connecting me with Kern. Kern put me on as a contributor for Cry. It started out with just like a couple suggestions, and then it was like, I want you to write for Cry monthly. And then from there, I did a draft reading series, and it was like a trailer of my book. So I did that, and everybody loved it. And then they reached out to me, and they're like, hey, we want you to do a 4-part short story series. And that's how Pretty Boys Don't Cry came to light. And since then, everything is just kind of like blown up.
Okay. Was writing your first journey to entrepreneurship?
I'm going to say yes, but I didn't see it that way at first. So when I finished college, which was like back in 2016, I went to Humber College. So I finished college from advertising and marketing communications. To practice everything that I had learned in school, I actually started blogging. And because I was very passionate in like fashion, I had a fashion blog. So that's when I really started having like a sense of like entrepreneurship, because I would reach out to different retail stores, and I had like an editorial calendar, and like everything was just organized, and I was connecting with other like small businesses. And through that experience, it ended up allowing me to be a TV stylist. Dwayne Morgan had a show, and he hired me on to be a fashion stylist for his show. So from like that project, which was really just to like really practice everything that I had learned in school, that opportunity came from it. But unfortunately, it wasn't there just wasn't like a lot of money in it. And I felt like, because I had like a family, I had to make a decision between, doing something that, isn't really making that much money now, and going and making the money, because I wanted to buy a house, I wanted to buy a car, and I also wanted to like prepare for their education, right? So I would say about when I first came out of college, so what, 2016, it's 2021, so like 5 years ago is when I really started seeing myself as like being an entrepreneur. And then through my mentors, they're just like, well, this is actually how you can make money as a writer. And that's when I was like, okay, I want to write a book. and that's what I'm doing. I'm actually working on the manuscript as we speak. It's looking like it's going to be about 70,000 words. And if you guys read my story, Pretty Boys Don't Cry, over on Love and Literature, those 4 chapters are actually a synthesized version of the whole book. So the book has a lot of the details that I had to leave out because of the fact that it was like there was a word count. So the book's going to have like a lot of the tea that a lot of people have been asking me about.
Okay. And tell us about some of your most inspiring accomplishments and or collaborations, and what about it inspired you the most?
Man, inspired collaborations. I think the collaborations that I have been like inspired by haven't even like really fully come out yet. But I guess I can talk about a couple that have been out. I did a short, well, it's not technically out. It was in a festival, but like no one could see it yet. But I did a short documentary with Makiba Lindsay, and it was about like her experience as a Black woman living in Canada and then going over to Africa, and just like the culture shock because of how much appreciation and validation she got over there. So that was a really amazing project. That was over at that was nominated for an award over at YouTube's Bufferfest. So that was really inspiring. And then I'd probably say my public service announcement that I did with Matthew Pompey. And that was basically like for men's mental health, because I don't feel like there's much support for us in that area. I know CAMH has like a campaign that's going on, but they don't even advertise in marginalized communities where like Black men like myself are experiencing like mental health issues. So I felt like I needed to take it upon myself to go ahead and push the video myself and just like release it.
Okay. So you mentioned mental health, and I definitely have a question on that I want to get to. Before we do that, I wanted to really ask you about the importance of mentorship. Mentorship in business, mentorship in life. What's your take on it? Because I know that you've got a mentorship for your writing, but what's your take on mentorship overall?
Oh man, I think in order for anybody to get to the next level with anything that they do, I think mentorship is critical. Because the journey that I'm on, there's so many things that I don't know, and it's just so much easier to go to like a mentor and be like, hey, this person they want to go ahead and do a web series with me. What should I charge? You know, I looked online, this is what it says, but you know, what should I go ahead and charge? Or where, like, how do I do like an NDA? Where, can you give me an example? Can you send me a template? How do I like pitch to an agent? Or how do I like write a book proposal? Right. So these are all things, because I mean, before you actually like know what you want to go ahead and do, I mean, most people, they go to school or they'll look online for it. But like when you have a mentor that has already done that, like Pollyanna Reed has already written a few books. Curran has already written a few books. So with those guys, like they've already done the work. So for me, it's like a cheat. It's like a cheat code. Like I can just go to them and just be like, hey, I have this question. This is where I'm at. And then they just guide me. They give me all the answers.
Yes, because what ended up happening is that you would go on a journey and you would go ding, 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 ding. Where you have a mentor, it slows it, it makes it better for you.
100%.
You know, definitely. So I would advise anyone, whether it's business, personal, get a mentor. You know.
Yeah.
Mental health. You are a mental health advocate. What role do you think mental health plays on Black fathers that are entrepreneurs?
Man, it's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, being an entrepreneur is already hard because you're dealing with it's time consuming. So it's really hard to have a good work-life balance and actually be invested in like your children's lives. like before I even like started this interview, and much like my previous interviews, I try to like spend as much time with my kids in the day before that. I mean, I'm already with them because I'm supporting them with online school. But I know that supporting them with school is not fun dad. And they also want like fun dad and dad who's going to be able to teach them things outside of the classroom. So balancing that and like having to take and do like meetings, and it's really hard, and just finding a balance for it is really hard. But one thing that I've learned is you need to schedule everything. You really need to utilize your calendar, because if you're not utilizing your calendar, then you're not going to be able to establish proper boundaries, and then it's going to affect you holding people accountable, and that's just going to mess up your money. So one thing that I've had to learn with balancing things is that you have to hold people accountable and you have to set up boundaries. And because of the fact that I'm doing everything as an entrepreneur, the overwhelming sensation of trying to be a father and also trying to like, get time in to do my writing is really, really challenging. There's times where I'm just like, I might be going through like writer's block. And one of the hardest things for a writer is to write when there's like noise and you're always being interrupted, because if you're like hyper focused on writing, then you don't want to stop, right? But then as soon as somebody interrupts you and then you have to start back again, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I pick up? So that becomes like a really frustrating process. And then with deadlines, then there becomes like anxiety, because then you're like, oh my gosh, like, how am I supposed to go ahead and get this done? And then you start feeling anxious. Then, and then sometimes, because of the fact, like for me, with my experiences, there were times that I wasn't establishing proper boundaries for my time. And then the quality of my work would just like slip, right? Mm-hmm. And then when the quality of my work slips, then I'm like, well, that last article wasn't as good as, the previous one. And then I'll start doubting myself. Am I really this good? Or, you know what I mean? When really it's like, I am this good. I'm getting better all the time. Mm-hmm. But because of the fact that I'm struggling with juggling things, I'm not able to put out my best work with that last article as an example. So yeah, mental health and entrepreneurship and fatherhood, it's very, very tough. For me, again, besides the scheduling, the only other thing I would say is affirmations and prayer. I like pray a lot. I pray a lot, and sometimes I just take time for myself and listen to some sermons, and I just let the kids know that, look, daddy needs a space, or I let my wife know that, look, I just need space right now, because like, I know that like I'm not like a single like father, but my wife's job is like, it's very, very demanding. So I have to step up my role as a father. And as a result, and also be a good father to them, mm-hmm. It could get really overwhelming, yeah. and you can get sad if you drop the ball with something, you know what I mean?
No, definitely. And I can definitely see how having a lot of stress and anxiety can mess up your creative block and make you get creative blocks as a result of that. As a graphic designer, when I have to design a logo and I'm interrupted, I have so many things coming at me, that does become a challenge. So I can definitely see that happening, especially in the role that you are in, right?
Yeah.
So as a married man, how do you do work-life balance? How do you make it work where you're doing, I guess you already said some of it, right?
Well, so scheduling is very important to me. So I'll wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's before like everybody else is up. And that's when I get like some time to go ahead and do some writing. For this week has been a tough week for me because my younger daughter, her laptop stopped working. So she has to use daddy's laptop, but my laptop is like my business. So if I'm not able to like use my laptop, I'm not making any money because I'm not writing, right? Yeah. So it's an adjustment because I'll have to use my phone and I'll have to be like in Google Docs on my phone. and it's just not the same thing for me because I'm not able to like type as quickly as I want to. Sometimes I even use there's another app called Otter, and it's a voice app. So you record and then it just kind of types everything out. It's not perfect as far as like everything that it's typed, but it's pretty accurate. So sometimes I'll cheat and I'll go ahead and if I have like an idea, I'll record it on the app, it'll type it up for me, and then I'll just go in and I'll just edit it.
That's actually a good idea. After the show, I'm going to get an app from you.
Yeah. It's just because sometimes you just, as a writer and an entrepreneur, you got to do what you got to do, because if you drop the ball, then, you know, your kids aren't eating, or your family's not eating, right? So you always got to be like moving. You always got to be thinking and strategizing and planning it out. I mean, it's okay for you to make mistakes because everybody makes mistakes, but you'll learn that certain mistakes can be very, very costly.
Okay. That is true. Definitely true. So you have a podcast on Spotify with your daughter. And I think it's a brilliant idea to do a podcast like the one that you have. I'm just going to look here. It says that the podcast is a conversation of people who are, sorry, I'm going to read it over.
No problem.
The conversations people are afraid to have with their kids and significant others. You analyze current events of pop culture that morally guides your kid, and so that way you can morally guide your kids to help them avoid making mistakes that are commonly made by others. Just to sum it up, so I'm going to flip that question over to you. Did pop culture help you with your moral guidance growing up as a kid?
Unfortunately, it did. And I say unfortunately because it didn't. So the way that I learned how to like talk to like women was from watching like shows like Saved by the Bell and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and like Family Matters. So like Stephon Urkel's was like who I would like look up to. I would look up to like Will Smith, and I would look up to Zach Morris. And the way that they approach women was very like obnoxious, and it was very misogynistic. And I mean, that's how I was raised, right? And then also like even with like the music, with hip hop music, it's, you know, it's very disrespectful towards women. And like I have daughters, and in my youth, I would be like, you know, driving, playing the music like loud, you know, and not realizing that my daughters are actually like listening to this music. And then, you know, as they got older, I would start to see that they would have like self-esteem issues because, you know, the girls in the music videos, they don't look like them, right? And then they would also hear how these rappers would be expressing themselves when they're coming out of like really hurtful relationships. And it just got to a point for my daughter where like I couldn't censor, you know, the type of music she was listening to. So instead of trying to like censor like the music that she was listening to, or even the content that she was watching, I decided to have a podcast where I can just explain to her what is going on and what's happening, so that she has like insight and she understands that like this is not right and why it's not right, rather than, you know, because everything with a catchy beat is catchy, you know, even if it is bad, even if it is, you know, telling you that, you know, you don't make enough money to be a part of this society. And I think it's also part of the reason why like our suicide rates are like so high is because of like pop culture. So for me wanting to like explain to them that, you know, like social media is used to show like only the good things that are happening in your life, and for us to have this conversation, and so that, you know, other children, because I know that like my parents, they didn't have the capacity or even the tools to have the conversations that I have with my kids, right? So I feel like it's my responsibility to like break the cycle and to just educate them. And then, you know, that way they'll go ahead and they'll be better than me because they have all this stuff earlier. Like my daughter taught me about toxic masculinity. I learned about toxic masculinity from her. And I learned that through, we were watching like some TikTok videos, and there was this kid, he was a boy, and he was straight, but he had nail polish on his hands. And growing up for me, like you couldn't go ahead and do that, otherwise you'd be teased and you'd be called names, right? But she was telling me like how he was like, if you have issues with like toxic masculinity, get that away from me. And then I started doing the research in terms of like what that meant. And that's when I was like, we need to have like a conversation, because, you know, she's a girl and there's guys that go ahead and they try to talk to her. And I want her to be able to understand, you know, why some of these guys are talking to her the way that they are talking to her, and hoping that, you know, when these guys do listen to our podcast, that they can recognize that the pain that they're causing some of these girls, and recognize the faults within themselves, and then just break the cycle. Because I know that not every parent has the capacity or even the tools to have these conversations. So I wanted to do my part.
Okay. I do think it's a great idea. And anyone who haven't checked it out, please check it out. How could they find it on Spotify?
Oh, so if you just do, just like my name is like for everything. So Carlos X Anthony, and it is actually available on like wherever you can find podcasts. It's completely like all over the place. So you can even catch it on Apple Podcasts as well. It's on, I think it's on Tidal. Yeah, it's on Tidal. It's everywhere. Google, it's everywhere.
Okay, good. Good to know. And in terms of you know, the podcast itself, I know that you have a lot of topics with your daughter that you discuss. What are some of those topics that you discuss? I know, like dating. I briefly heard one about the stigma with strippers, if I'm correct. So let us know.
Yeah.
Discussed on there. I think it's brilliant because you're having a real conversation with your daughter. I think she's turning 15, and you're really, you know, being real with her. And I think a lot of parents need to have those conversations and to listen to it while it's happening. I think that's also amazing. So tell us more about those type of conversations that you're having.
Oh man. Well, where should I even start? Yeah, my daughter and I, we talk about like everything and everything there is to talk about. We have talked about sex, and I thought it was very important for us to talk about sex, because my conversation with my mom with sex was after I had already had sex. And the conversation was, you know, use a condom. You know what I mean? Like that's all it was. It wasn't how to use a condom, how to put it on, nothing like that. It was, you know, use a condom, and that was it. So that's why I thought it was really important to, like, for me to have that conversation with her, and to have it at an early age, because I know that kids are more active. I mean, kids were active even like in my day. I had some friends that were like 11 years old when they were losing their virginity, right? So I just wanted to make sure that I can prepare her for whatever was going to come her way. So that's part of the reason why we started talking about relationships and sex. As far as like strippers, I've dated like some strippers from like back in the day, and I know they told me about, they shared with me like their experience as far as how men would like treat them and like handle them. And my daughter, she listens to like Cardi B, and she listens to like Meg Thee Stallion and Nicki Minaj. And Cardi B, she used to be a stripper before she was a rapper and a reality TV star, right? So I wanted to have the conversation with the stigma behind like being a stripper, because I wanted her to know that it's not all like fun and games. You know, there is like a bad side to it, and there is also a good side to it. But a lot of people that like, when you're a stripper, they think that, you know, you're also, you know, providing sexual services or like extra, like automatically. Whereas there are just some girls that are just there to dance. They don't want to be touched or anything like that. But I mean, like the whole game has like changed, you know, like, because now we have like OnlyFans, right? So the whole game's changed. But that was part of the reason why I needed to have the conversation, was because everything was like changing, and like some of the girls that I dated that used to strip, you know, they were starting like OnlyFans pages. And I just wanted to like just have the conversation, because she was seeing this stuff on social media anyway. And I was like, well, I mean, your dad has like, he has like experience. So I want to go ahead and give you as much knowledge as I have, so I can just kind of prepare you for anything.
Are you looking to monetize the podcast? Like getting, or have you already started?
I actually I haven't, I did we did 5 episodes on the podcast, but then I had some issues with her mother and the podcast. And that's part of the reason why we just took a break on the podcast. But I definitely am open to, monetizing off of the podcast. I mean, for me, I was just trying to use it as like public knowledge, same with like Google, like they just want to give us access to information. That's how I started. That's my whole intention, was to just give people access that didn't have any access.
My camera went off. I don't even know why that happened. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, maybe your producer will be able to fix that. Well, I guess she probably came out. Well, I guess while I'm here and I'm waiting for her, I want to let you guys all know that you guys could check out my reading on love and literature, Pretty Boys Don't Cry. Stay tuned. I also got a web series that's going to be coming out really soon. Really excited about that. Shout out to my homegirl, Jolene. She's actually, she's going to be writing with me on this. Oh, and Banki's here. She's back. Awesome.
I'm back, but my camera stopped working. So we'll just, oh, there you go. I'm back.
We're back. Okay. That's why you got to love producers. They just fix stuff.
Yep. So, okay. So trying to get back to where I was. Podcast.
Yes.
Monetizing. Now, how have you influenced your kids to take on entrepreneurship, or kind of provide any guidance towards that journey? Or do you believe in more of they go to school, they get the education, then they go to a 9 to 5? What's your take on that?
I've been trying to get them on board with entrepreneurship, but I have 3 of them, so they're all very different, and they all have different work ethic. And in order for you to be like an entrepreneur, you have to have, good work ethic, and you have to have passion. So out of the 3 of them, my middle daughter, or my middle child, she has like the entrepreneur spirit. She has a health line when there's like lotions and there's like, I can't even remember. There's like lotions and different oils. It's called Eva's Essentials. She's over on like Instagram, so you guys can all check that out. She also makes like soaps. So she's just like starting. But my wife, she like teaches like financial literacy. So like our kids are like on stocks. They have stocks in like different company. They know how to look at their stocks on their like iPad. They tell us that, what stocks they want to buy. So like Roblox is something that they play on their iPads, and they love it. So when they heard that it was going to be available as like a stock for them to buy, they're like, Mommy, Daddy, I want you guys to go ahead and buy shares into this because we think it's going to be really good. So they're all good, but like Eva, which is my middle child, she's the one that's like, she's the real go hard. She was on HBO Max. She did the voiceover on Sesame Street for like for one of their like animation segments.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was like her first like paid gig. And I mean, there's other stuff that's happening, but I can't really talk about it because we're just kind of waiting. But there's some stuff happening in the fall. And yeah, I can't really talk about it, but it's gonna be dope. She's blowing up, acting, voice, being doing the voiceovers. She's blowing up, and I'm really proud of her.
Nice, amazing, good to hear. So any tips for anyone who wants to start be a writer, a freelance writer?
Oh man. I
Bu-
would
business
say,
takeout.
I would say if you're gonna be a writer, the first tip I would say is build up your self-esteem because it comes with a lot of rejection. It's not that you may be like a bad writer. It might just be that your writing may not be for the publication that you have submitted to. So I would definitely go ahead and say, build up your self-esteem. Start a blog. Start off with just just journaling. Start with something as little as like 500 words, because typically when you're like short articles are like between 500 to like 700 words. So I would just start off with like blogging and just really let your personality show. Really talk about what it is that you're interested in and what you have an opinion on, and what you have experience in. I feel like those are like the most organic. Those are the most organic writers, and those are the writers that I like to read from because it doesn't seem like it seems authentic what I'm reading, and I really like to hear like stories that are true. I don't like to read like fake stuff.
Okay. And just before we close the show, my final question is, what does the future look like for Carlos X Anthony?
Oh man, the future is very, very bright. I got a web series that's going to be in development, and I just got hired on for another web series.
Nice.
I'm looking at the one that I'm going to be co-producing. This is going to be like my awkward black girl. So I'm really, really excited about it. I just finished the third draft for the pilot, and it's an emotional roller coaster. It's funny, it's sexy, and it's also sad. Like people are gonna have anxiety watching this whole series. So I'm really excited about it. So be on the lookout for that. We have a name for it, but we don't know what the funder wants to do because we're co-producing. They're going to be producing financially. So we don't really know what we're going to name it as of yet. But I would just say everybody follow me on my social media handles, which is at Carlos X Anthony. Thank you so much for bringing it up on the screen. Instagram is usually where I like post everything. So if you guys definitely follow me on my Instagram, you guys will be able to see that soon. Also, I've been experimenting with sketch comedy. So I did a casting call probably about a month ago, and we've been doing table reads. I actually have a table read after this interview is done. So we're going to be filming that on the 26th, and I'm hoping mid-July is when everybody will be able to see that. So they'll be able to get a good taste of like where my humor is at, and I'm just going to be trying to push and make as much content as possible. That's it. That's what I'm doing.
Amazing. Amazing. And thank you so much for sharing. And I'm looking forward to see all the upcoming projects that you have coming up. For everyone who's watching, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. I apologize for the technical difficulties in between. But thank you for tuning in. Please feel free to like and share on YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube and like and share. Carlos, thank you so much for being here today. This episode was more of a Father's Day special. We spoke about a lot of, fathers and entrepreneurship type topics. And I really appreciate you spending the time to have this conversation with us today.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you guys.
No problem. Well, thank you. And everyone have a good night. And see you next Thursday. Peace.
If you enjoy our programming and want to help support Black entrepreneurship, please donate today. www.businesstakeout.com/donate.